Our next session is the state of producing. So please join me in welcoming to the stage our moderator, founder and CEO, editor-in-chief at TheWrap, Sharon Waxman.
Please join me in welcoming Justin Wilkes from Imagine Entertainment, Carolyn Strauss, producer extraordinaire, David Zucker of Scott Free, Samantha Quan, and Sarah Timberman. This panel is totally full and everybody here is in the Producers Guild, so I think we have a lot of producers in the room. I mean, if, we don't want anything bad to happen, because the state of Hollywood would just not be good if something bad happened in this room. Because, at the end of the day, I'm a big fan of producers in general. I'll just take a second and just say kind of the unsung heroes of the really hard work of making great entertainment. The actors get a lot of love. And of course, I'm a writer, so the writers deserve a lot of love. but the producers do a lot of that sweat equity. And, one of the things I want us to talk about today is just how difficult it has become in what has always been a really difficult profession, where you're out there on your own just trying to make something happen. You're literally creating something out of nothing. So the title of today's conversation is The State of Producing, and I think let's just go down the line here and just let's talk about what is, in your view, the state of producing today. Is it healthy? We've come off peak TV, but you've got a lot of streamers. They're making money now, finally. They've got a lot of healthy subscribers, and the movie theaters maybe, possibly could be coming back. Thank you, Lilo and Stitch. So, Justin, let's just start with you. Give us your overview.
I was guest lecturing at a NYU class about a week ago, and there was a young student in the class, filmmaker, producer, writer, director, and she said, "Do you have any advice, for someone who's coming up right now?" And I said, "Find another profession to go into."
Oh my God, that's so inspiring.
Well, I was joking. I was half joking, because I was like,
really
honestly,
expose you to a lot of students. That seems like a great idea.
I was like, I've worked my whole life and my whole career, and it's the most circuitous path to get where I am today. I can't possibly imagine anybody having to do anything like that. Not because they can't do it or they're not qualified to do it, but because so many of the opportunities that I either created for myself or was a part of just don't exist anymore. So that's maybe the pessimistic side. The optimistic side is that through all of the craziness and mishigas in our business right now, this is also a great time to be an entrepreneur. And when you ask what a producer is, which my mom does every time I talk to her, including on the way over here, she's like, "What is a producer?" You champion films, right? Isn't that the line from the studio? Like, I'm not the director, I'm not the writer, but I champion. What a producer does is you're an entrepreneur. And whether you work at a company like I do or you're an independent producer, it's the same job. We have to figure out how to create these opportunities, create a market for those opportunities, and then ultimately do what a producer does deep down inside, which is produce the thing so it actually exists. You're actually producing a product, and get that product in front of an audience. And as we'll, I think, learn in the next 56 minutes, all of that, all the rules have changed. But I would actually say there's more opportunity now to be entrepreneurial than there has ever been before.
Well, thank you for that. Did you tell the students at NYU that at the end
No,
of the
I
day,
said, I guess, go into finance.
Just get out.
Yeah, become a lawyer.
Terrific. Carolyn?
It's interesting because I guess if you're used to an uncharted path, that the opportunity exists, in a way. If you're interested more in a charted, in a well-trod path, I think those are getting more and more overgrown. I guess I would continue with that tortured metaphor. It seemed to me, in terms of this kind of things that attracted me to being in this business and doing this, are things that were a little bit off-center or not what people were expecting, or those kind of things. That the appetite for those kinds of projects seems vastly diminished, and there is an express sameness, I think, in terms of what people are looking for, but what seems to break through are the things oftentimes that surprise people. For me, what is, I guess this is not an uplifting thing, is that, the kind of things that interest me about the work that we do, the ability for somebody to say, it's always about convincing somebody to say yes, and but the wild stabs of yes, I think are harder and harder to find, for me, personally.
David.
I mean, we live in an earthquake state, and I think historically, through the years, everybody's always said it's.
Aren't we now a fire state?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay. Just sorry.
But the first metaphor is that these are tectonic changes that are happening now. And what I was going to say is, historically, it has always been cyclical. Particularly, looking back at the network era, certain shows would be in vogue, certain shows were out of vogue, and those things would cycle through as audiences responded to programming. But these changes are clearly tectonic. And to use maybe a nerdier metaphor, it is, I think, producing is navigating an asteroid field today. You really don't know what you're going to encounter, and you have no idea. Well, I'll go deep with the nerdy. There used to be even a time, producing-wise, where certain things were undeniable, where you could make that jump to light speed, and you knew the show was going to sell. That does not exist now, to an extraordinary degree. No matter how highly packaged a piece is, no matter how extraordinary a script is, you cannot assume anything. And so I think with that challenge comes with greater clarity. Kind of like, I don't think it's any different than what's happening in the country right now. There are people who are under the delusion that democracy as we've known it is going to recover and going to prevail. I'm not of the view that that's the era we're in right now. I think we have to accept that American exceptionalism is going through transformation people in this country never thought it would. And so we can choose to recognize that and then bring clarity to, well, what's important to us? And that's where I think the strength of the industry hopefully will prevail, because it brings the artists, it brings the producers, it brings all of us together to say, well, what's important here? And let's really put our energies where they belong. So that's the good that can come from it.
No, that was really good. I come from a little bit of a different place, and I guess the only way that I can describe everything would be extremely insecure. I know people who say the exact same thing of when young people come to them and say, hey, if you could do it all over again, would you do it? And they're like, actually, not now. It would be impossible to start and be an independent producer trying to get into the system. Now it's so difficult. And I think that regardless of the situation, it's always been difficult. I think that now, as everyone's been saying, we're at a time where it's almost like there's an imbalance somewhere that needs to be figured out. And I do think that from where I come from, and what's happened in independent film over the past few months, it's been really kind of hopeful to me, because I do think that in this time of change, a lot of original works can happen, and a lot of, really positive energy could break through and create, a new system. And I may be naive, but I do have faith that that will be okay eventually, and I think that, I don't know, I guess we just have to have faith and work together in terms of helping everything get better again.
Sarah.
Before we came out here, we were talking about the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh. I don't know if any of you have been to it, but it's fantastic. And I view it as like an antidote to what, like if you're feeling that this is a very corporate industry and things require millions and millions of dollars, all you need to do is go to the Fringe Festival to be reminded that people have things to say that regardless of the turbulence in our business and the contraction and the, what Carolyn said about the less inclination to take wild swings, I am a firm believer that in the end, those wild swings will be taken, and that I think everyone on this stage has had the incredible experience, and I'm sure a lot of you had too, of being involved in a thing where people come up to you afterward and said, like, that spoke to my experience as a human being in life. And I feel like those things are always going to be there. So it's like, as a producer, I feel like you have to like block out the noise about this is what they want and this is the only thing they'll do, and lean into things that feel, I don't even like that expression, sorry, but like, gravitate toward things that feel like truthful about, like, it's a strange time to be a human being. And I think when people sense truth in something, it's incredibly moving and exciting. And it's hard. This is a hard time. And like the number of times in the last like 2 years I've said, oh, we'll be doing this in 2 months. And then it's 8 months later. And you're like, oh, wait, now we're just talking about actors. We would have been shooting this. But it'll pass, I think. And good things will get made. And I second what Samantha said. What you're all saying is that like we're all in it together. And it's a lovely thing about our business to be a community of people who want to tell good stories about what it is to be a human being, and it'll still happen.
Okay, so you guys there's a common thread in what many of you are saying here. I guess it would be useful to kind of drill down a little bit, since you all agree it's always been difficult, but it's really difficult now. Hard to do original ideas, hard to take big swings. We kind of knew that, Hollywood's been trying to do retreads, going back in the archives. Pirates of the Caribbean was not a new idea. That's a 20-year-old movie, for example. But if you can, what is the thing right now that you think is making it so challenging to get a yes? Is there, studios have always been afraid to take chances on big ideas, and they should be, because they have to make money at the end of the day. Not that you guys don't, but they have shareholders, et cetera. We all know the stakes for them, and they want to keep their jobs, basically. So what is it right now that, if you can pinpoint that at all, to anybody?
I don't think it's one thing in particular. In many ways, I think it's a perfect storm that's been brewing since the peak of sort of peak TV, or peak content. And I think it's a combination of things. So one is you have Netflix, who when they first came into the marketplace, say 2015, 2016, completely transformed the metric for success and reset, as we all are experiencing, the economics of what is actually a success and how does one get compensated for success. And everybody else followed suit. We don't have to go through the whole history of this because I think everybody probably knows that. So that's sort of part one. Part two, you have tech companies that have now come in. So whereas before it might have been the Gulf and Westerns of the world or the Comcasts of the world and other media or media adjacent, you have tech. And for any of these tech companies, Apple, Amazon, the amount of money that's being spent in content is such it's a rounding error. It's Jeff Bezos' jet fuel error, So it's not they don't even look at it as a real business to an extent. So you're now working in an economy that is sort of a false economy.
Yeah, that's a good
and then
point.
to add one more level to that, now you have all this downward economic pressure, right? Stock prices are down, the economy's down, the whole world's down. And so that adds to everybody's pulling back. Again, if you want to be pessimistic about it, you'd say, well, there's a lot less content just getting produced now than there was during peak TV. And what is getting made, the budgets have been completely depressed. On the positive side, and this is, again, where I like to go, if you look at the number of movies that were made last year and the number of TV shows, it actually is somewhat equal to the amount of movies and TV shows that were made prior to 2016, prior to the streaming boom. So when it was the good old days of network television and cable and the 5 movie studios, it's about the same amount of content. So you could argue that maybe is the right amount of content for the audience.
I guess maybe, but there's feels like a disposability to things now. Like, I don't know, and this is just anecdotal and observational, not from any sort of informed position, but it just feels like things get made and they get thrown away. Things get made and thrown away and thrown away and thrown away. And there, it doesn't feel, I don't know, it feels like things are, while budgets are down, costs are up, it's like sort of all these competing pressures on it, and yet the thing gets gone, and it's like, poof, gone in a minute. I don't know what it is.
Well,
It's just.
I can pick up both of those points, if I may. And this is a big sweeping statement, but it's one I really believe has been the experience of the last 9 years, is we're not a talent-facing business anymore. That is the fundamental change to me, is that I remember coming up in the business, and it was always, we're not a widget factory. We make custom suits. It's like each project is something unto itself. That's what inspires us. That's what makes us put all the blood, sweat, and tears into it. That's not the case anymore. And we can quote all the way back to, I remember some article I read when David Zaslav came into Warner's, and being a bit shocked by some of the statements that were made in terms of what the approach was going to be going forward, given some of the historic talent relationships that existed at Warner Brothers. Those things are not valued anymore, which is why I think packaging, which has been sort of this crazy pendulum swinging from one way to another, and now you need highly packaged. It's almost like we turned into the feature business. Then suddenly Netflix is like, no, we're back to pitching again. I mean, the whiplash that everyone must be getting, it's how we keep our medical community healthy out here. But I think that's the fundamental change. I think, staying with Justin, you always have to accentuate the positive. The positive is, and Netflix was central to this, is we're a global business now. And I hearken back to, I remember in like the 2000s, the idea of having a foreign language or a subtitle before Lost, before Heroes on screen, didn't exist. You weren't allowed to have that as part of your content. So there are some extraordinary developments in terms of the types of talent we can work with now, the partnerships we can take on. But our business, I think, is, well, I don't want to go into, I find all of these things are corollary to what's happening in the country as a whole, and don't want to go down that path, but it's unavoidable in the sense that we have to find a way of formulating new partnerships, new relationships with talent, taking more of an independent television approach to the extent that's possible. Funding-wise, it's not. But that, I think, will be the means by which new programming will emerge. And the positive of the sort of austerity programs that all these very wealthy companies who are not behaving like wealthy companies are taking is that they're willing now to acquire again. They're willing now to partner. And there was a period of 5 or 6 years where you couldn't do that. Yeah. So it's finding those opportunities and then finding the right content to seize on them.
Can you explain austerity program?
Well, in the sense that all of the companies are shrinking their budgets to such an extraordinary degree now. There's a project we're taking out next week, and it's the first time I've ever had a studio partner say they're going to ask how much this project costs. We haven't written it yet. We don't know where we're shooting it yet. But they want a range because the algorithm will make an estimation of whether that project is worth that. Not the way we historically have developed content. So in the sense of we are in a totally different world now.
Why don't they just give you the damn budget then?
Well, we're going to talk about that because I'm not going to talk about that right now. But that, I think, when we look at the relationship between producers and studios and where I think the fundamental schism is, it is because the studio streamers have arrested total control of that process. And so we have incredible line producers that we work with, incredible partners, heads of department who excel at what they do. And they are all being dictated to now. Mm-hmm. And from that does not come good content.
Totally agree.
The C word, content. Sam, if you want. You don't have to.
Yeah, well, I come from a very different place, which is, I work with my partner, and it is artist focused. And I don't get me wrong, I do know that.
Say Sean Baker's.
Yes, Sean Baker.
Yeah,
and I think that the thing is we're fully aware that some people consider us dinosaurs in that way. But at the same time, I feel like if we can provide a model that is kind of outside, that can continue to make original stories, we will continue to do that. And our budgets are as low as we can make them. Because I think that's something when it comes to money. I was talking to a young person yesterday, and I was like, they were talking about being a first-time filmmaker and how they wanted, to make their first feature. And I said, well, what's it about? And they're like, it's this small movie about like a Filipino family driving across country. And I was like, how much are you looking for? And they were like, $5 million. And I said, yeah, that's not going to happen. You should figure out a way to change that $5 million to under 500, and you can figure out a way to do that. You can figure out a way to tell your story, and I think that you could, you've got to try and figure out a way to do it not like if you were making it for Netflix, but like see how much money you can get and then figure out a way to make your movie. And that's how we kind of work.
I mean, everybody looks to you guys and are like, oh my God. I mean, I say all the time, in the world of Tangerine, there's got to be a way to do this.
Yeah, and I mean, I was telling someone yesterday about that too. I was like, they were like, well, we don't have enough, we don't have enough money. We have all these camera moves and we want these dollies and stuff. And I said, Tangerine was made for $100,000. Yeah. And in terms of a dolly that was Sean on his bike with an iPhone at the end of a broomstick.
Yeah.
And it's these things. It's these, I know it sounds crazy, but these, when we made Red Rocket, I was like, yeah, well, our dolly for that was, we had a camera on the back of a car that was a hatchback, and we would move it back and forth, and it was MOS. But like, these are the things that we would do to make what we needed to make. And it's guerrilla. Mm-hmm. And, we have to figure out sometime before, I was just saying before that ANORA was the first time that we were able to do everything that Sean wanted to do. Mm-hmm. We got a budget big enough that Sean, like when we were in the edit, I remember he turned to me and he was like, oh my gosh, like this looks exactly the way that I felt like it looked like in my head. Wow. And it was that for me was like, oh my gosh, this is like the most wonderful moment. Because as a producer, for me, my goal is what does he want? What does the story need? How can I provide that? I always try and say, yes, we'll figure it out. But there have been times in the past where the figuring it out is we simply cannot afford to do this scene. Mm-hmm. How are we going to do something else, and we figure it out? But I feel like, dinosaurs or not, it's a scrappy way of doing things that we tell the stories that we want to tell. Yeah.
And I think, for me, when we did Somebody Somewhere, there was a real, from the go, knowing, okay, we're going to have to do this on the cheap because it is a story. If we want to we need to take the pressure off it. And sometimes it is finding those ways, although way harder to do it within a TV studio system, that we live in than it is in the sort of independent film world.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, yeah, I think that's what's important to point out is like you are I'd say, aspirationally what a lot of people would like to do, which is to have the guts to work outside of the system and make the sacrifices that come with having that freedom,
I feel that way too. It's when you say that you're a dinosaur, I feel like you're the
vanguard, right?
The vanguard, yeah.
Well,
and it's exciting to see what you've been capable of doing and inspiring. It's funny because when one of the companies that David was talking about that cry poverty but are huge corporations say, be more creative with less money, it's depressing. But when you say it, it's incredibly exciting and inspiring. It's like, oh, of course we could do that.
But there's certain, I think there's, doing it within a corporate structure is impossible, and because there are things that they ask of you and you need to do it. But whereas it's exciting to do it
and it feels
outside
like
of that.
There's going to be you found the sort of middle space between the sort of studio system and traditional buyer system. And then I was talking to these guys about, I'm going to plug her, but her name's Talia Rake, and she's a Friends daughter who's out of college who's started a thing called like Build a Film. I was saying where like she got 3 locations donated in LA and 3 locations donated in New York and took submissions to set things in those locations and got 500 submissions of scripts, and they selected one in LA and one in New York. They used the like fee that you paid to submit to raise the money to make them, and they're making some, you know, so there's that version which is like totally guerrilla filmmaking and very cool, and then there's the traditional model that we all know. But I think the interesting and exciting area is sort of between, I mean, what she's doing is amazing, and then what can we learn from that, those of us who have worked in this business and had the privilege of having the kinds of budgets we've had, you know, what can we learn about doing it differently and thinking, you know, of working a little more outside of the traditional boundaries. I do think for people here who are sort of, I see experienced producers, a lot of them among you, so you could probably tell us more than we could tell you. But I feel like one thing that we've all talked about that's kind of democratizing if you're interested in the more traditional television and filmmaking system is the sort of upside and downside of the reliance on intellectual property. And I feel like there's so much great IP out there. Like sometimes it's kind of alarms me how dependent the industry feels on IP right now, because you go, someone had to have an original idea somewhere, like the novelist did, the journalist wrote their piece, but there maybe because people are conservative about spending right now, there's something about something that's existed prior to making it that is like a reassurance. And we at my company with my partner, we've made a lot of things based on intellectual property, and it's not always like the thing that a book scout found and you would never get your hands on it because it's gone long before its publication. Not at all, in my experience. It's like the book I picked up on set because everything was going smoothly, and I was like, well, this feels like a television show, becomes a television show. So I think it's like, it really is a, as I said, sort of democratizing thing about as a way into our traditional industry is find a great story. There's so many out there. You know, obviously find an original idea because that's the best, but there's so many good books and pieces of journalism and things. I've just, you know, reading ProPublica or the Marshall Project, and it's like, wait, this is a thing. And it's, in my experience, that's been really exciting, where you read a great piece of journalism or you read a great novel and see something in it, and then get someone else to see something in it. But anyone can do that. We can do it, you can do it. So I do think it's one avenue.
I just, would want to say, I do think, to your point, that the corporate relationship can work if it's a partnership. I mean, the company you worked for years was the pinnacle of that. I think what
HBO, we should say. Yeah.
I think what's fundamentally changed is that partnership is grossly imbalanced now. And it's so dictatorial that it makes it near impossible. And it's really gotten to the point where it's absurd. I mean, the stories of the last year, some of the productions we've done, I feel like there isn't a week that goes by where it's like, I can't believe I'm having to have this conversation. And a lot of it's because they're not...
Is there an example you can give?
Well, an example on production we did within the last couple of years, we were trying to work on the pilot budget. And because of circumstances of the talent involved and where we were shooting, we put into the budget that we were going to have to take meal penalties. That's the way we needed to shoot. And the company came back and said, you can't do that. And we were like, but we've shared with you what the whole approach to this is going to be. We have to take meal penalties. And they're like, you're not allowed to put them in. We don't permit them. And then we got a call from creative saying, well, you can't put that in the series budget. That has to go in the pilot budget. So it was kind of like being between two parents who were both whacking you over the head and saying, you have to figure this out, but you can't do it this way and you can't do it that way. So you have to live within our rules, but your rules make no sense in the world of what we're trying to create for you and with you. That's not a partnership. And that battle actually continued through the entire shoot of that show.
And I'm hesitant to ask, but is that because if there are tech companies that now own studios, they come with a different mentality and they're not former producers themselves?
Yes, I think the reporting structures within each of these companies, I guess what I've kind of learned over these years is we can assume nothing. We can't even assume we're speaking the same language in terms of, I assume this is how we would make a show like this, but they may come from an entirely different mentality. And it's exacerbated by the fact that so many of these companies, particularly now, are in such turbulent times. So there's so much insecurity. There's so little cooperation. I mean, when we were doing Man on the High Castle, I think we went through 5 regimes over 4 seasons. We're doing Blade Runner now. I can't count how many different lead executives we've had over the time that show has been through development and now into production. So you're in an era that's so different from, years ago when, you could say we lived in the 5 families era, where you knew.
Yeah.
Yes, you knew who the authorities were, you knew what the leadership was.
The Gambinos.
Yes, exactly.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. And then the studios were your partner. And then it's like, well, we all have to figure out together how to get this achieved. There is none of that now. And so in some ways, I mean, I've never worked in film, but I've always perceived, well, film, you need your advocate. And then you don't know what's going on within this big institution, but that advocate will help get you there. And then you align. We're looking for those, but so many of them keep getting fired. So it's like, okay, we lost our advocate. What happens now?
Yeah.
There was in the 5 family days.
You make films also, so I mean, I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
Yeah, well,
that side.
just add to what David said, there was an alignment of economic incentives for the first 100 years of this business. The producers, the artists, the studios. Of course, the studios are always going to fuck you. That's as old as time, right? But at least there was an understanding of how they were going to fuck you, And in success, everybody benefited. And artists like to bet on themselves. The guys that I work with, Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, they made a whole career betting on themselves, Ridley Scott. And in success, everybody benefits. Now there's a misalignment of economic interest. And it goes back to what you were saying about these tech companies, because their metric of success isn't clearly box office. It isn't even ratings. Maybe it's subscribers to some, to others not. It's stock price. And when it's not even your core business, it's really more of just a vanity play. So unless there's a realignment of these economic interests, we're going to continue to be in this situation where either we're getting squeezed or the work that we do isn't really fully appreciated. And that's actually what gets me excited about the independent world. Again, I would say vanguard, not dinosaurs, because even if you look at last year's Cannes, obviously your success through that, and even this year's Cannes, there is a thriving European/international market right now. There is money that has poured into that space, most notably from all the streamers that want to operate in those individual countries. Netflix has to spend $1 billion a year just in France to maintain their charter. Same with Italy, same with Germany. So when you have all of those streaming platforms putting up that kind of money for local production, that's a lot of money that's flooding into the marketplace. And we're not necessarily seeing that here, but if you can start putting those packages together, again, being an entrepreneur, that's a different way of getting things made. It's a different way of benefiting economically, potentially. To just answer your other question, at Imagine, we obviously have this storied history, and we've continued to sort of ebb and flow with where the business has gone. We got into documentaries at a time when that was just starting to ramp up. Scripted TV's always been an engine for the company. Now it's a bit of a tougher time. And it's actually features that we're seeing back on the upswing. And while a couple of our projects are based on past IP, to your point, the majority of them are actually original ideas or original ideas that we've generated through a book or through an article, not a superhero or not even a past project of ours. And that's encouraging, because I think what our brand has always represented over the now 40 years are these sort of genre movies. It could be sport, like a Friday Night Lights. It could be music, like an 8 Mile. It could be an action-adventure film, like an Apollo 13. Those genres are what we're known for as a company. So when you start thinking about what's the next version of that story, we're doing a heist movie right now that's a little bit reminiscent of, it's called How to Rob a Bank. It's a little bit of like an Inside Man kind of a story. Not based on that IP, but sort of in that same zeitgeist. We have another movie that's more of a thriller. We have another movie that's more of a sort of a psychological drama, sort of like in A Beautiful Mind kind of a space. And for us, seeing those sort of mid-level, mid-budget movies with movie stars and with visionary filmmakers, and seeing that that's selling right now at a time when you guys still have a lot of Marvel movies, other big tentpoles. That's encouraging to me. And I actually would attribute that back to the independent market for opening up the audience and, more importantly now, the streamers' minds that those kind of movies can do well. People actually will watch those movies. People might even go to the theaters to see those movies. This past weekend's box office is encouraging. And I think that has really helped start to bring the pendulum back to a place where there's a wider variety of the movies that are getting made.
I want to move on to a slightly different topic. Let's talk about production, the flight of production from California and LA, the latest whiplash around tariffs and whether tariffs is an actual concept that could be applied. And then finally, I want to talk about this idea of a federal tax incentive to keep production in the United States. You just talked about the legal imperatives for Netflix to keep that France and EU countries are imposing to keep production in those countries, which makes eminent sense. We don't do anything like that here, but it would be weird, but it's on the table that Trump might do that. And obviously we are in Sacramento on the cusp of potentially almost doubling the tax incentive for California, but that's literally chasing the horse after it has completely left the barn, run all the way around the globe, and like is somewhere in, South Africa or whatever. Okay, but let's hear about, what are your thoughts about that? I don't know if you all live in LA or ever spend any time in LA anymore. Jump on in.
I mean, all I can say is it's a hard question to answer because we don't fund our production. So I'd say...
you choose where your productions are produced.
Well, per the earlier answer, we don't. We try to influence it. And so I'd say, at least from the point of view of what Samantha was talking about, I've always tried to take a sort of all the lessons I've learned from parenting when it comes to working on productions, which is what's in the best interest of the child. And so the fights that I find we usually have with the studios when it comes to locations are, what's in the best interest of the child? And yes, you, grandparent with all the money, who's going to maybe send this child to school, will have some strong opinions on it. But we just went through this experience. We just did another cycle of The Terror with AMC. And we had a very interesting, very long battle with them over where to shoot. This wasn't tariff, but maybe this is instructive in terms of at least how we engage in this conversation. And we wanted to shoot in New York, and they wanted to shoot in Canada. Shocking. But they had very legitimate reasons, and they would share spreadsheets with us over how many more shooting days we would get, how much more building we could do, and so on and so forth. And we're like, that all makes good sense, but let's talk about what the priorities of this particular project is. It's mostly interior drama. It is something that will rely heavily on performers and performance and direction and design. And we happen to be working with a producer who we'd worked with for years on Good Wife, who we knew how to shoot in New York. They hadn't had as much experience in New York. So the battle with them was, okay, for us to deliver this drama, we need that cast. We need that cast from first to 40th on that call sheet have to be the best we can get, and there is no better pool in America than what's available in New York. And that battle went on for quite a long time. They didn't believe we could do it there. And they had legitimate reasons to be uneasy about it. But it was an elongated debate, and proud to say that we won, and we came in under budget. But that's ultimately the kind of partnership we need to have that we're not really permitted to have. I think the tariff problem now is it's kind of like we read the paper each day. We're talking with production executives each day saying, well, what do you know? What can we do? What can't we do? And it changes with such frequency. It's really just an ongoing discovery process. We're not going to know because I don't think this country knows where it's going in that regard.
And look, runaway production is not a new thing. It's pre this administration. I can't imagine this particular administration wanting to do anything to benefit Hollywood. It just doesn't seem in their best interest. However, it's also, it's a little sad to walk around some of these lots and they're not full. And you have this incredible talent pool in front of the camera, behind the camera, craftspeople that are all really suffering from that runaway production. But I agree with David. Each project has to be put together in a way that's going to best benefit the project. And sometimes that means going abroad because of the extra incentives that you're going to be able to get. And other times we should be able to make a compelling case to do things here. We shot a film.
Are you mostly shooting?
We're unfortunately mostly shooting abroad. We do have a series on this lot, which I'm proud to say, The Burbs with Keke Palmer, a TV series based on the movie just up the street there. That's fun. And we're doing another movie for 20th called Whale Fall, which got the California credit. So actually part of it's on a stage and part of it's up in Monterey. But we've got 2 shows in Australia. We have a show that's supposed to take place in Las Vegas with Andrew Garfield and Jude Law starring as Siegfried and Roy. That's shooting in Budapest, because Budapest looks just like Las Vegas.
Totally.
Actually, it's a lot of stage work. It's heavy design. There's a lot of European cast that we're going to be able to tap into. And then Ron's next movie should take place in the United States based on the subject matter, but we're also looking at Budapest as another option. So it would be great if there was some added incentive. It would be great if Sacramento could get their act together. They should have done that already. But unfortunately, I think this is probably already a train that's left the station to a certain degree.
But I just want to say, I think that is hopefully, to the degree that we can be empowered with the people we collaborate with, that's what we're tasked with doing. I mean, we did a series for PBS, who had not done a series, I think, in 11 years, that we ended up shooting in America. We paid the actors Williamstown Theater rates, but everybody was really drawn to the material. We did 2 seasons of it. So to your point, it's like,
what was the show?
Mercy Street.
Okay.
And we had an extraordinary cast of some very well-known actors, and we had a great time. But it's because everybody was committed to the project, and they loved what the potential of it could be. And, hearkening back to the days where those partnerships really existed, I mean, here's another case in point of where it changed. Even over the years that we were doing Good Wife and Good Fight, it always used to be when we'd talk about the next season, there would be a conversation with business fairs, with production, with creative. This is what we learned. This is where we see the show is going. We would have a collaborative conversation. And then when even negotiating of the actor deals or negotiating of how many stages, it was always done as a 2-way conversation. That doesn't happen anymore. And there was one year where suddenly we heard that they'd made an actor deal, and the Kings were like, but we don't need that actor this whole year. And it just suddenly, I think as things changed corporately, not to indict any individual, because a lot of these people are just trying to survive within their corporate reality, but they were all tasked with individual responsibilities of what they had to deliver in the confines within which they had to work. And so, it's our job to recognize those things and then to work with them so we can come up with a successful production. But those conversations have stopped. And it's always that lucky moment where it's like, God, the business affairs person called and didn't give away a single trailer to that actor that's going to ruin the rest of our cast because we can't afford single trailers for all of our leading players. It's like they don't realize the damage they're doing to their own product because the conversation has stopped.
I would say that as just a shout out to a company that I think is still sort of talent facing and respectful of artists and of producers and writers, but we've all done stuff with FX, and I feel like it's in this sort of sea of companies where you're sensing a tech company's agenda more than any interest in what a writer is to say. I feel like they're trying to, as a company, protect that and respect it. And my experience with a show that we made there, FLEISHMAN is in Trouble, is I had done all the work that you're talking about, which is we need the best casting pool, we need this, we need the locations, it won't be authentic. I had stacked up all my arguments, and then I got on the phone with the production executive who was like, okay, we've budgeted you for New York. You can't do this one in New Jersey. And I was like, oh, like I didn't need to spend 2 days like mounting my arguments. They got it. You know, would that be different today?
But you know what's interesting is that the executives at FX, and I would argue also at HBO, they've all been there a really long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it speaks to what you're saying is that, you know, sort of the cycling through of these executives, that there's an I mean, it's such an old-fashioned idea that somebody stays at a company for a long time. However, I do think that they have the kind of confidence and a sense of a shared value system in terms of what's important. Now, there have been change in all of these companies anyway.
But I agree with that totally. And it's also the feeling that at that company or like HBO and in your day in HBO too, but like where you talk to one person, you feel that it's not that there's like a group think, but you know that you're not going to, that if the people you're developing a thing with are really passionate about it, it's probably going to go well. It's not the thing where the people that you're sort of dealing with on the script most directly love it, and then it goes on to, you know, people higher up. I think a lot of companies right now, you can be thrown a real curve. You know, everyone is invested in it, and then it goes to the last decision maker, and they might say, I don't get this at all. And there are, I think, a few places where that's not true, where if you're like-minded and you're feeling positively reinforced, you're likely to have things work out. So look for those places.
Part of our job, I think, as producers now is to do investigatory work and find out who is Oz. You know at FX, it's John, and you know it's Casey. At a lot of the other companies, you know, we keep getting new reports of what the structure is and who's moved into what position. And I mean, you could play crazy games with the Amazon structure, you know, which keeps changing from week to week, and they keep coming up with new titles and new formulations. But a lot of times when we're trying to affect some result, you're trying to figure out who do I need to talk to?
In not disputing that, but in fairness to Amazon, first of all, they're a new studio that has come in and made a commitment to creating entertainment when other companies have been shriveling and dying. Yeah. And to some degree, they are really trying to figure it out. And they bought MGM, and it is awkward and it is weird. And I'm not here to defend Jeff Bezos, God knows, but because it is a rounding error and all that stuff. But the folks they have there, like, I think, you know, I started a company from zero, and it, you know, wasn't Amazon MGM, but I'm just saying, like, you make a lot of mistakes when you're starting out, so you might be the victim of that. Whereas, you know, that team at FX, you know, they came from Fox. They were sort of like wholly moved over to Disney and have been allowed to do their work and keep their culture. I don't know. I'm just pointing out.
I agree with you, but I think it gets back to Justin's point, which is what's the objective, and needing to learn the cultures of each of these companies. I mean, we were very early in Man in the High Castle, and we weren't oppositional, but I remember there was a revelatory time when we were asking them why they were marketing or not marketing in the way that they were, and then we realized, okay, we're in the grocery aisle. I get that. Are we at the end of the aisle where we're featured, or are we just on the shelf? And you try to intuit these things based on the decisions they make and the questions you ask. And yeah, they were figuring it out. But, you know, and there were a lot of strange, interesting perversions that came with it, especially then when they couldn't have boots on the ground in certain countries and certain states because of the tax issues, if you may remember back then. We weren't allowed to even shoot in Canada. Interesting times. But yes, it is evolving. But I think what's also dispiriting about now is we also don't know how any of the shows are performing. So, you know.
That you don't get metrics back?
Nothing.
Seriously?
Yeah.
No. Netflix is probably the most open in terms of sharing a certain kind of data. And so if that's the high bar, you can imagine the others. Usually we have right now 2 shows on Amazon, and they've been sort of flip-flopping 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. This doc series about the Earnhardt family, the NASCAR family, and a show called Motorheads, which we're the production company for. And the feedback was, they're doing great. And we're like, great. It's number 1, number 2, number 3 on the top of the U.S. Yeah, it's great.
Is that because, like, on your next deal, they don't want you coming back and saying, hey, my show did so well, can you pay me more? I mean, is that...
They just don't report data, and Disney doesn't report data. And I think part of it goes back to what we were saying before. If your incentives aren't aligned, if it's about stock price and it's about subscriber growth, then performance data could actually set you back if people started to realize that either not as many people are watching these shows as they might think, in the case of like Apple, which has a very small subscriber base, or in the case of Netflix, how do they actually put that data together? What is a view? Is it they watch the whole thing? They watch the first 3 to 5 minutes of it? How does that work? I will defend Amazon, at least on the movie side, because they're our home studio. I know the TV side's still somewhat figuring itself out. Courtney coming in has really transformed that place, and Julie and the whole team over there. Most notably, to your point, they are committed to theatrical. Yeah. Every movie we're doing with them, there's a discussion up front. Is this a streaming movie? What do you guys think as producers? What do you think as talent? They'll have an opinion too. Or is it a theatrical movie? And at least for the next slate of projects that we're doing, there's a real theatrical commitment.
Yeah, totally.
Which is something that most other places aren't doing right now.
Yeah, they presented at CinemaCon this year.
Yeah.
They really were courting the exhibitors.
But just to say your point, there's really good people at these places. The one-to-one, I think, is positive. It's trying to figure out what sort of corporate imperative.
I think your point's really important. I'm learning all kinds of good stuff today. Carolyn, I wanted to just ask you to tie up on the production question. The Last of Us, where is that produced in?
First season we shot in Calgary and the second season in Vancouver.
So Canada, and more Canada. Yeah. Yeah. And was that where it should have been?
Well, I mean, it's a specifically American story, so it would have been great to be able to shoot here, but we didn't. But the other part of it is kind of post-apocalyptic, so having kind of that great expanse in Alberta, was certainly helpful for sort of the cross-country trek of the first season. And the second season probably should have been in Seattle, but we couldn't afford it.
By the third season, you'll be able to get a post-apocalyptic America.
Exactly. So it's going to work out. Yeah.
We're nearly there. I want to run down really quick, because we're going to run out of time. Scale of 1 to 10, the chances of a federal tax incentive to help American production. 1 the lowest, 10 the highest. Sarah, likelihood of that coming to pass?
Don't start with me on that one.
Oh, wow. Okay, you won't grade it? Okay.
I don't begin to know the answer. We're living in such an unpredictable world. I'd just be making it up, so I'm not going to.
Sam, what do you think?
I really couldn't say, so I'll say 5 maybe.
Oh, that's good.
But only because I don't, I would, again, I am being hopeful.
Yeah.
So
5 doesn't sound very hopeful.
I'm doubling down on the 5. I'm right there with you.
All right.
but I will be hopeful and say 5.
Cool. Your chances will go up if you all say something nice about Donald Trump on this panel. I'm just going to say that. But okay. David.
I really couldn't guess. I don't have a clue.
Carolyn?
I'm probably more pessimistic than you, so I'll say 4.
Yeah, 0 to 4, I think, unfortunately.
0 to 4.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I like it. It's a cool idea. I mean,
It sure is.
and many other Western governments do it. So, all right, we're gonna run out of time. But I guess I want to hear for the producers in the room and maybe the young producers in the room, if you guys could just share, a piece of advice now and don't go into producing. It's
Become a doctor, become a lawyer.
Yes, exactly.
Teacher.
But, a piece of advice and something, that you wish you knew when you were starting out. I can start at either end, but...
Yeah, I can start. I thought back to my earliest memory. I grew up in upstate New York, and I had posters on the wall of movies, and some of the movies had names of people that I've now gotten to work for and with, which is amazing. And from the youngest age, I just knew, even really before what a producer was, that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I didn't have the attention span to direct. I didn't want to be in front of the camera. I liked the putting on the show part. I liked the bringing people together. And to now get to do that and have been doing that professionally, I can't do anything else. There's nothing else that I know how to do. And I know that there are kids growing up today with posters on their wall of movies and TV shows, and maybe even some of the ones that we've all had a chance to work on. And that hasn't changed. This medium still means something. Getting a group of people together in a dark room and being transported, and whether the screen is this big, or this big, that's an innately human thing that so far has not been able to be taken away from us through every technological advance. And there's something really special about that. That's why we do this. God knows we don't do it for the money. There's easier ways of making a living. So my advice would be, if you really believe this, if you really want to be a part of this circus that we've all subscribed to because you love what that end result is, then you just have to do it. And you just have to keep doing it. And this too shall pass. There will be a transformation of our business. No one can predict it. But I guarantee that filmed entertainment will survive this in some way, shape, or form. And somebody has to produce it.
I guess for me, and I did not have the knowledge that this was sort of where I was going to end up at all. It was more of a fluke. But
What did you think you were going to be?
I didn't have a clue. I was like, maybe I'll go to law school. I don't know. I didn't know what to do. But I just I got really lucky. But what I realized is what was one of the things. I started out because I was temping, and I got a temp job at HBO. But what I realized when I got to HBO there was that there was a quality of thought and people there that I really gravitated to. I was like, oh, this feels way better than Drexel Burnham or wherever I was temping around New York, and more fun. And one of the things that I believe very strongly is not just about enjoying the product, but enjoying the process. And because I feel that all of us who get to do this, we're really lucky to be able to, I mean, I know it sounds kind of Pollyannish, but it's really true. You know, it's a fun job. It's hard sometimes, and you can have, blow-ups with people or whatever, but I think people are really interesting. I think being able to make these things and watching people do work to their, all the crafts people and department, people work in all the departments and the writers and the actors and watching them do their work, to me, it's a privilege and it's exciting. And to be able to enjoy that is, to me, the thing I would say. And the other thing I would say is, which was a lesson, learned, is that basically we're in a business of opinions. It is not facts. And so being able to have a conversation as opposed to being dug in about something is a pretty important skill to nurture along the way.
I'm going to go back to a parenting lesson I learned in the last 4 years. During COVID, when my twins were 8, I read them the Little House on the Prairie series, which I had never read, and I avoided that show as a child. But the books were extraordinary, and they were a surprise. And the singular lesson I got from it, which I thought, what a lesson for children and for adults to learn, is to survive, one must adapt. And every book is this extraordinary challenge that this family had to overcome. And then they would pack up the wagon, put the dog, till the dog didn't want to go anymore, and they'd move on to the next place they went. And that, to me, was the big lesson. I think it's speaking to the time we're in right now, that this whole panel, with all the challenges we talked about, we didn't make mention of what an earlier panel was talking about, which is AI, and what that is going to do to our business fundamentally. And I would only hearken back, if you haven't read, there's an extraordinary chapter in Harari's book on Sapiens, where he puts an equivalency between the age when humans went from hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists, and links that to the modern internet experience, and how we as a species have this extraordinary capacity to go hurtling forward into something that we have no clue what we may be creating a nightmare for ourselves. And then he does sort of a juxtaposition of what the hunter-gatherer life was, and then the hardships of the agricultural life. And we, I think, are encountering that at a time when it is speeding and hurtling us into the asteroid field to bring the whole thing together as a story. So I think that is something for all of us, young or established on the producing front. That's the challenge in front of us. It's also the opportunity. What is that new tomorrow going to be? I think the only thing I may feel differently than certain people is it's going to take a long time getting there. And if you read the John Landgraf article on FX that was in Vanity Fair, he speaks explicitly to that, as he speaks explicitly to everything that guides us. And this will take time. It's going to be a long transition. That's not worthy of applause.
Sam?
I would say, similarly, I started out as an actor, and I remember being on set, and I met some producers, and I would ask, what does a producer do? And it was interesting because the answers were never the same. And some of them, honestly, I don't think they did anything, which is like so interesting. Because I remember one, I said, well, what do you do? And he said, I'm a producer. And I said, well, what do you do as a producer? And he said, I just sit here. And I was like, okay. And then one that I really, really liked was, I said, what does a producer do? And they said, I fix problems. I fix problems that have happened. I fix problems that are going on right now. And my brain is working on the problems that might happen. And I'm already working on those. And I was like, oh, I like that. And then he said, basically everything, because it is basically everything. So I would say my advice to young filmmakers coming up or people who want to be in production, I feel like there's something holistic about it. And my advice would be to suck up all of the information that you can. Like, it's not like being a doctor where you go to medical school and then you end up in this place. I don't know how I ended up where I am, but all I know is I was on so many sets, sucking up different information, following producers around, following sound guys around, doing whatever I could to stay in the business and learn as much as I could to be as educated as I could in everything. And it is super fun. And my advice would be is no matter how hard it is, if you love it, keep going.
Sarah, bring it home.
Too much pressure. I so echo what everyone up here has said. It is fun, and it's. I feel pretty blessed to have had the experience that I've had over the years with people I love deeply. I remember when I was a studio executive before I was a producer, there was another executive at this company who was a more cynical person, I think, than I am, who said, you think these are your actual friends in this business, but they're not. It's business, and in the end, you keep these things separate. I've never been able to keep it separate. Some of the people I'm really closest to in the world have come from the things we've made together. And, and I listen to all of you, and I'm like, oh, I got to think about international sales. Oh, I got to. But what I love is sitting with writers and talking endlessly about ideas. And there are a couple of them that I work with over and over again. And, I'll wake up in the morning and there's a text, as there was this morning, saying, let's do this. And I'll text back, and it'll be, an article I read. It'll be a old British format we saw. It'll be 3 sentences. I won't even take you down the roads of things that some of my writer friends and I talk about. But I'm constantly going, I can't believe I'm so fortunate to be able to spend my time doing this. So I think for all the challenges in it, there are incredible rewards. And I hope we've been helpful in some of the ways of navigating it, because it's a crazy time. But the thing that we all get to do is fantastic. And I'm thinking of The Last of Us and Caitlin Dever, who was our star for Justified and Unbelievable, and I knew her since she was like a girl growing up. And when we wrapped Justified, I just remember Caitlin sitting on set playing a guitar, and everyone was weeping. You make a production, and it's like making a play when you're in school or something. It's like a whole small town that grows up together, making this thing and having 1,000 inside jokes about what went wrong along the way. And, AI is going to do what AI is going to do, but nothing replaces the very human experience of our work. So I encourage you, even with all of our trepidation, keep going if you love it.
Well, that's our panel. Justin, Carolyn, David,
Thank you.
Sam, Sarah, thank you so much. Thanks, y'all, for coming.